Today we're going to be reading from Luke 23:50 to 56. Now there was a man called Joseph, a member of the council, a good and upright man, who had not consented to their decision in action. And he was waiting for the kingdom of God. Going to Pilate, he asked for Jesus' body. Then he took it down, wrapped it in a linen cloth, and placed it in a tomb cut in the rock, one in which no one had yet been laid. It was preparation day, and the Sabbath was about to begin. The woman who had come with Jesus from Galilee followed Joseph and saw the tomb and how his body was laid in it. Then they went home and prepared spices and perfumes, but they rested on the Sabbath in obedience to the commandment. You know, the Saturday after Jesus' death is one that we tend to overlook when it comes to Easter celebrations. We seem to jump from the crucifixion straight to the resurrection, obviously. However, when you stop and look at the day and kind of unpack what Luke 23 is saying, which is the one I just read to you, there's a lot going on that I think we can identify with. Saturday would have been a time of unknown for the people around Jesus. Their very own Jesus was dead. The Messiah was dead. Gosh, I imagine the questions and the shock as people started to digest that. And then came to the time where they had to come to terms with the fact they actually had to bury Jesus. And with the Sabbath fast approaching, they actually had to do that quite quickly. They needed to get the burial out of the way so that they could actually rest on the Sabbath, on that Sunday. At that time, I would imagine that the world would have seemed to stand still for those people close to Jesus. Everything they were hoping for would have seemed to have just died with him on the cross. Everything that they had been talking about and even getting excited about would have just been silent because Jesus was silent. It was a really stark contrast to what was happening on Friday. On Friday, Jesus was alive. He was saving slaves and talking about how he was the King of the Jews. On Friday, even God was making himself known. He tore a veil in the temple. He caused a bit of an earthquake. He made the sun hide, and he even allowed his own son to die. But then comes Saturday, and Max Lucado, he actually describes this day as Silent Saturday. Jesus was silent, God was silent, everything about Saturday was silent. Have you ever had those moments where you feel like your relationship with Jesus is silent? Because as Max Lucado actually goes on to put it, the silence of Saturday actually torments us. What was God up to? What have we done wrong? These people had seen Jesus raise others from the dead, then why was he lying in a tomb dead himself? You know, Good Friday was a dark day, but the resulting silence on the Saturday must have been an even darker time for the disciples. You know, God talked a lot about the future with them and made promises of what was to come, but what happened on Good Friday would have made that all seem like nothing. How could such promises withstand such disappointment and death? Most of us, if not all of us, have been in that same position that people close to Jesus would have been at that time. There are those times when our jobs go a bit crazy. It's when our finances take a bit of a turn. It's when a loved one passes. It's when our marriages dissolve or we fail a university paper. It's when our children get sick or we don't get that breakthrough or healing that we're really desperately praying for. It's those times when everything feels dark. It feels like Jesus has gone silent, like everything he said couldn't possibly become to pass because of the hopelessness of what you're going through. It almost feels like there's this giant stone between you and him. How on earth are we supposed to trust God in that silence, in that suffering? You can have a look at Jesus for that answer. As we discovered yesterday, Jesus suffered a lot, but he trusted God was going to come through and that he was going to raise him again. He was just patient in his suffering, in his death. You know, there was a reason why God resurrected Jesus on the third day. Jesus' death had to sink in. His death, the long-winded burial, was a prelude for a ridiculously glorious display of God's resurrection power. His resurrection was so great because we actually had to wait for it. The reality of his death and the hopelessness of what the disciples felt as they woke up on that first day and then the second day without him just made his resurrection so much more sweeter. What it shows is actually despite the circumstances, God was there all along and he actually had a plan. It might feel right now that there's the stone between you and Jesus. Just because he isn't doing anything right now doesn't mean that he isn't around. Silent Saturdays call us to be patient. They call us to trust the resurrecting power of God. Can you think of a silent Saturday in your life? Are you going through one right now? Let's take some time to stop and be reminded that even though God might seem distant or silent, he isn't absent. He's here right now, and he's got a plan for what's to come. Father, thank you for the revelation of this silent Saturday. That even though you might feel distant, even though the world thinks you're dead, we know that you're here and working for our good. Father, help us in this time to be patient. Give us a revelation to see what is to come, and may we trust that you will bring hope to this situation. We thank you for Saturday. In your name, amen.